the meaning's really supposed to get you, not like the visuals.
Well, I told her if their family, maybe her mom could preview it because they tend to show more. Oh, yes, Carl.
This isn't typical. I kind of when we did the other side, so just take a look at it.
You
I
can have
I didn't want to compare Plato to.
Oh yes, your mom. Actually, your mom stopped by and talked to me anyway about your alteration of it.
I'll talk to you.
As long as it's approved by your mom, I'm good. Okay, so let's dive in. We have a lot of stuff. Our art of the week. So it's another person not wearing clothes. I'm sorry, but that's just a lot of Greek art, is people not wearing clothes. But this one I really wanted to show you. This, and I have tons of notes about this thing. We know the names of a few ancient Greek sculptors because they were famous in their own lifetimes, all right? And one of them is Praxiteles. And this is by Praxiteles, although it is an Aphrodite. I will show you, but you tell me something. She's leaning on a prop. What do you know?
Roman.
It's a Roman copy. This isn't original. This is a Roman copy. It was probably, partly in a bronze. This is from Alexander the Great time, all right? So Plato's probably dead by the time this was carved. This is the Aphrodite of Knidos, which is one of the islands, by Praxiteles. Prior to this, we've had gentlemen not wearing clothes, but we haven't had ladies. They didn't have nude ladies. And Praxiteles is like, yeah, I'm going for it. It's Aphrodite. She spends half her time not wearing clothes anyway. Let's just do it. So he has this, she's laying aside her clothing and stepping into the bath. We have knowledge of the original of this statue from writers who wrote about it. I just think I wish we had the original. Pliny, who's the Roman writer, I think I've mentioned him. He actually saw Vesuvius erupt. His uncle died. Oh, last year, remember? His uncle died.
Is this the younger? Or
this is the younger.
Okay.
And Pliny the Elder died trying to rescue people from Pompeii and Herculaneum. Pliny said this statue, the original, was superior to all the works, not only of Praxiteles, but indeed of the whole world. Pliny thought it was the greatest statue ever made yet. Now, whoever it was made for originally didn't buy it. Like the island who commissioned it decided they didn't want it. So Knidos bought it. And people started sailing there just to see it. Tourist money coming in, right? And they put it in a round temple so you could walk around it and see it from all sides. Lucian, another Roman author who saw the original apparently in the 2nd century AD, says she has a welcoming look, a slight smile, and there was a dewy quality of her eyes. However, this isn't it. This is a Roman copy. And I'm looking at her like, yeah, the face is okay. I don't see the dewy quality. You guys have seen probably bad reproductions of good art. When you go to an art museum and they have little statues of stuff in the gift shop. You know what I mean? And it's just like you can tell what it's supposed to be. It's Michelangelo's Pieta or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's plastic. It's okay, but it's not like the original. I don't think this is like the original. But the original apparently was stunning and brought people from all over the Mediterranean to go to that island and just see this statue, which I think is very cool. Yeah, what
No.
were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. All right, open up your reading guides. We only have 4 weeks after this. And I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with you guys because you have one less week than my classes that I teach. I don't know what we're going to do. It's Aristotle, 1 week of Aristotle, or Alexander is getting bumped, and I'm not sure who's.
Aristotle.
Hey, this is not a democracy. I will just make a decision. Or you could read twice as much Aristotle in 1 week. You don't want to do that. Okay, so there's tons to talk about in this. And there's no way in an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes now that we can do that. So I'm going to sort of jet ski over the top of a lot of it and then stop and scuba dive down, you know, and then jet ski. But I want to go over the questions just so that you know. And also because one thing leads into the next thing, so you can't really leave things out. But at the end of book 3, 2 weeks ago, I didn't really mention this, but you know we have these classes of people in this city that Socrates is setting up. We have I'll call them the low class, the workers. All right, they're nothing special. They're the craftsmen. They're the people who run day-to-day life, okay? They grow your food and they make your shoes and that sort of thing. And then we have the guardians, and we've chosen them specially. And then we're going to watch those guardians, and the ones that are particularly smart and particularly resistant to temptations, to forego their austere way of life, they're going to get pulled to the top and they're going to become the ruling class, all right? But all those guardians, Socrates had mentioned that they're going to live like Spartans, all right? They live in common and they don't have any money of their own because he doesn't want them to get greedy. And they're going to eat together. They're not going to, you know, have personal possessions because we don't want them getting jealous of each other. And Adeimantus says, you know, Socrates, they don't sound very happy. Like, that doesn't sound pleasant. You're not really giving them a very pleasant way of life. And that's the first question I asked you. Why does Socrates not care that the guardians might not have the cushiest life? What do you say, Matthew?
He says the republic is not for making one class happy at the expense of the others.
Yeah. We aren't aiming, it says, to make any one group outstandingly happy. I'm on page 95. But to make the whole city so. You don't like that, Ethan?
No, I like that.
You're like,
I just wanted to add to it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, happy is really relative.
Happy is relative.
I mean, I'm happy with my life, and I don't spend my money on a bunch of clothes and stuff,
Yeah.
you know, things like that I want. But like, I guess Guardians of the City are just more, I don't know, conservative in their spending and conservative in their appearance because they don't want to get greedy. And I mean, I know I'm diving down.
No, that's fine.
Like, you can be happy with only just a little, and happy is relative.
Does it tell you anything about maybe the lifestyle in Athens? So remember when this book is set, it's being written at a time when Socrates is already dead. But it's being set, obviously, at a time when he's not. It's during the Peloponnesian War. Athens is an empire. The riches of the world are pouring into Athens. Of course, they're spending it like, you know,
100 talents a day.
I don't know what the analogy is. Yeah, talents and talents every day to support their fleet. Yeah, Naya.
I feel like kind of piggyback off that feelings are so, like, relative. Like, they just kind of come and go, like, and sometimes it's like just through not only like things that happen in your day, hormones, other things, like feelings aren't consistent enough for other people's happiness to be put above like that conversation.
Which is really interesting that you went that direction, because remember what we're doing. Socrates is setting up a city. Why is he setting up a city? To find justice in the city. But does he really want to find it in the city? Where does he really want to find it?
In real life.
In real life, in your soul. So he said, well, cities are big and souls are obscure and small, so we'll look for it in a city and see where we find it, and then we'll extrapolate. So, and I'm going ahead into our questions, but I talked about this a couple weeks ago. If we have 3 classes in our own bodies, in our souls, the thinking part, the belly part, I just want what I want. I want ice cream. I want, I'm cold. I want cocoa, whatever. And then the spirited part, the part that that controls, that says, no, you can't have that right now, and here are good reasons why. This says, run away, it's a battle. Or no, this says, run away, it's a battle. This says, you shall not run away. But this part says, oh, but there's glory in standing firm in your place where you're put. And there's renown that comes with doing one's duty. And see, this part tells this, agrees with this part and tells this part, don't you run. So so making a part happy, see, if I just make this part happy all the time,
Then the other parts are lacking.
and that's like it being an animal. Socrates would say, that's what animals do. Is I'm hungry, I'm eating. I'm thirsty, I'm drinking. I want this, I'll take it. That's what animals do. We're not animals. We're better than that. Did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was also, like, just thinking about it this way. I look through this whole perspective as, like, he's creating kind of like the perfect city, like, reality-wise, and, like, realistically, these things can happen because we live in a fallen world. And, like, a society like this would never thrive just because other people are greedy and, like, whatever. So, obviously, the way he's setting this up, finding, like, the perfect system, not everybody's gonna be happy, but it's what is just.
Yes.
And so you kind of have to look through it through that lens to kind of understand more what's going on and why he is saying what he's saying.
And does it see, aren't we very concerned about everybody being happy? I mean, wouldn't you say modern society is concerned about people's individual happiness, maybe at the exclusion? I'm sorry, Ethan, what did you say?
I want to piggyback off that. Society as a whole goes to the belly first, their desires and wants, their needs. And I've noticed that kind of that Christians use only their head, and sometimes, and it's like it's really sad because, but we need to deny our desires, our wants, and then focus on both, not just our head knowledge of the Bible and our head knowledge of who God is, but our hearts.
Yes.
Once we open our hearts, once our hearts are not darkened and black and I have a relationship with Jesus, our hearts are clean, are washed by the snow. Once we find that, we can make the world a place where we're not just looking to our desires.
Yes. That's very good. That's very good. So if that's our goal, we want to make, remembering always our goal is our own souls here, as we talk about the city, but he's still talking about the city with his friends. We don't worry about making this class luxurious or particularly happy, whatever happy might mean at the given moment. What is the most important thing to guard to make this happen? Anybody other than, not to criticize Matthew, but okay, go ahead, Matthew, you get it.
Education and upbringing.
Education and upbringing. He says, good education and upbringing, when they are preserved, produce good natures, and useful natures, who are in turn well educated, grow up even better than their predecessors. Remember earlier in the book, in our city, for our guardians, they're going to get only the right kinds of poetry, right? We don't want any of that stuff that talks about the gods fighting with each other and going down on battlefields and getting stabbed and fighting over golden apples and all of that stuff. I'm sorry, Homer, you're out. We can only have the right kind of music that brings harmony to the soul and not disturbs the soul.
What's harmonious in music? How do we define that, right?
They had apparently, do you remember they went through a bunch of classes of kinds of music that were played for different dramatic events and things like that, which I know nothing about. So we're going to guard these kids carefully. Keep that, can you put that in the back of your head? Because later this morning, we're going to talk more about education and what does it mean to get an education, since that's what you're doing, presumably. And frankly, that's what I'm doing too. I don't see any reason for age or the lack of a school available to me to stop my education. That would be boring. To keep learning something. So, they've got their city. And then he says, let's find justice in the city. So I asked you, he looks around for all of the, what we call the 4 cardinal virtues, wisdom and courage and moderation and justice, okay? Where does he find them? Where are they primarily? Go ahead, Matthew.
Wisdom in the guardians.
Okay.
Courage in the soldiers.
Okay.
Moderation in both the citizens and the rulers.
Okay.
And justice in the separation of classes and harmony between each other.
Harmony between. All right. So he says, our thinkers are the wise ones. They're the rulers. Our courageous are on the battlefield. That's easy. Moderation is shown by our guardians because they live moderate lifestyles, and it just kind of trickles down, you know, into the merchant class. But he said, where is justice? He says, oh, we're looking for it. I'm looking for justice. I can't find it. And he said, oh, here it was all along. Do you remember when we said that every group does its own job? Farmers are farmers and they're only farmers. And cobblers are cobblers and they're only cobblers. And guardians are guardians and they're only guardians. And when everybody does its own job, that is justice, and it brings harmony to the state. Now, when I read that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not totally convinced that that's what justice is in a city, but I forget, oh, but we're not looking really for justice in a city. We're looking for justice here. And think about the implications. If everything does its part, and this has a part, if I never get hungry or thirsty, I will die. Right? Right? But I have the power to tell myself when and what I will consume. Right? This can tell it, but I need some help. I need to be, I don't know, worked into it. You know what I mean? If I'm abstaining from something for some reason, or I'm putting off eating for some reason, like I need help. I can't just say, I can't logic myself into it. I need to have a reason of courage or an ideal of moderation or fasting because I want to pray and be closer to God. You know, I need that. And if everything's doing its job, see, it works well. But when something gets out of control, and for me that would be this. All right, there's a Whitey's, there's a Whitey's, there's a Whitey's. All right, and it's like this part say, no, you're not doing that right now. So he says that is that he feels like he has found justice in the city. And of course, then he says, now we're going to look in the soul. And basically, I have already answered the rest of this page. He says, what page? Oh, well, you know, that's a good question, Hannah. I'm trying to decide. Oh, 117. Towards the bottom of 117. Between the D and the E. And surely we haven't forgotten that the city was just because each of the 3 classes in it was doing its own work. I don't think we could forget that. Then we must also remember that each one of us, in whom each part is doing its own work, will himself be just and do his own. Of course we must. Therefore, is it appropriate for the rational part to rule, since it is really wise and exercises foresight on behalf of the whole soul, and for the spirited part to obey it and be its ally? And that these two, switching over to 118, will govern the appetitive part, the part that has appetites. And then we have the just man. It's sort of like, to me, it reminds me of, what is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm sure you've heard, you know, sermons, or you've talked about the fact that when we do the first, the second one should naturally be flowing from it. Does that make sense? If you love God with everything you have, you won't want to harm your neighbor. You just won't have the desire. And I feel like if in this case, if your parts are in harmony, that sounds very foofy, doesn't it? If the 3 inclinations of your soul are harmonized, and everything's doing its right part, then being just to other people will naturally flow from it. Does that make sense? Because why am I unjust? Well, I took your stuff because I wanted it. What part wanted it? Like, I like your shoes, I like your coat, I like your bank account, whatever, you know. And I take it. And I am unjust to you because part of me is run amok, right? And it's not paying attention to this part that might say, that is illegal. And this part that says, yeah, and it's just plain wrong and immoral. Don't do it, right? And they're out of whack. I'll let Alex go first. I don't know who had their hand up first.
All right. It seems like the just man is the man that follows all the virtues of God, who lives in love.
And so I like that. So hold on, because we're going to come back to that later. But that one could say, and this is why I had you write that paper about Socrates and Jesus. We're going to write another paper. Shiv showed me that. We'll have time later. Socrates' teachings in Christianity. They're not like this. But there's some places where they approach each other that we could say that, how does that happen? How do these three parts harmonize? It takes grace and it takes the Holy Spirit. That's what creates it. Socrates is living in a world where if you just want it and try, you can get there. And we say, no, you can't. You can, but not in your own power, not in your own steam. What are you going to say, Matthew? I need to drink.
And so that kind of reminds me, like, in Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis was talking about people like, oh, like, the kind of like the popular thing to say is like kind of you do your thing, and the idea is that yeah, you shouldn't like interfere with other people, but like yourself, it's like whatever, you kind of do what you want. But the problem is if you're not in sync with yourself, you don't got everything figured out, you're gonna crash into other people. You said like there's like a boat.
Yes.
Like oh, I don't want to crash into other boats, but if your boat's going all the way, you know, just doodling around, it's gonna hit another boat.
Yeah. Yeah, so that limiting of oneself and that having oneself under control flows out to your neighbor, doesn't it? Let's switch up to book 5. In book 2 or 3, Socrates had made a little comment to the side. And he'd said, well, you know, of course our guardians will have all their women in common. Like they'll share all the women.
I remember.
And he just and his friends, so Glaucon and Adeimantus said, time out, Socrates. What's the deal? And Socrates like, oh man, I hope you weren't going to bring that up, because now we're going to have to go into all this and why this is a good thing. And they're, well, we have all day, Socrates, so let's do it. And remember, they're hanging out at the Piraeus, waiting for the nighttime. They're at a religious festival while they're having this conversation. Do you remember that at the beginning of the book? And they made him stay, because like, there's going to be horse races at night with torches. Okay, I'll stay. So they have all day to kill. So Socrates is forced to talk about men and women. And the first question I asked you is, in what way does he think men and women have the same nature, and in what way do they have different natures? What do you think?
What was the question again?
It's the first one. Oh, you don't have your book. That's totally fine. How does Socrates think men and women have the same nature? And in what way do they have a different nature? Will you let Matthew do it? Yeah, go ahead. Oh no, Ethan.
I was going to say, men and women should receive the same kind of education and training and do the same kind of work with the same natural ability.
Okay. And this is because, that's not totally an answer to the question, but the last thing you said, natural ability. So, here, let Matthew add on and then I'll
And
add
so
this
the
in.
thing is similar is that they both have the ability to excel in certain areas, like both becoming guardians. And then the difference is men, well, with a few exceptions, are usually superior in everything, just like proportionally.
Okay, proportionally. And so he doesn't, when he says that, he does not mean men are superior in intelligence necessarily, because he says, so here's an example. He said, and we don't think about this, a soul, we don't really have the idea of your soul having a certain vocation, but we would think of it as aptitude, I guess. Would a person who works with their hands have the same inclinations and aptitudes as a person who works solely with their mind? Do you see what I mean? So say a craftsman versus a doctor who, I mean, uses his hands, but basically we think of doctor as being a mental, you know what I mean? He has knowledge of diseases and knowledge of cures, and a blacksmith, you know, has knowledge of working with physical things. And so for Socrates, or in the Greek world, this is different kinds of natures, different kinds of souls, and we would call it aptitude or inclination. Some people are just outdoorsy, right? They would hate to work in an office all day. They want to be outside. But some people like it. They like just sitting with a book and reading, and they're useless with their hands. I'm useless with my hands. I can't do anything. I don't know what my problem is. I tried to knit and crochet, and it's just not good. And so he says, so would a doctor, he says, and a cobbler have the same kind of soul? And they say, okay, no. He said, but would a male doctor and a female doctor have the same kind of soul? It's like, yeah, they'd have the same inclination. Women have the same inclinations and abilities as men do. Remember the world in which this is being written.
Come on, Socrates. Anti-misogynistic, go off, Socrates. Like, in Athens, I literally wrote a comedy about how Athens sucks for being for literally not even letting women go out.
No, women were Roman women had it much easier. Greek, Athenian women, like, because the Spartan women were out there even exercising naked with the guys, well, not with the guys, but, you know, like the guys did. But the Athenian women were very confined, all right? You didn't go out, and the idea of there were a couple of educated. Remember Sappho, our poet from Lesbos, and there was a woman named Aspasia who was just very well known, and she was a friend of Pericles, and I think Plutarch mentioned her. But for the most part, women did not receive any sort of mental training or education at all, and they just did not go out without male attendance. And to say this, oh yeah, we'll put the female guardians through the same educational system. That was huge. But like Matthew said, he still says, women share by nature in every way of life, just as men do, but in all of them, women are weaker than men. And so before the women in the group bristle at that, I mean, we all know, all sane people know, the average man is stronger than the average woman. And that's why, and Naya, I'm sure you know, like for the PT and stuff, you know, the Army gives different, I was just talking this to my son, you know, the different standards that they have to pass, because if they were the same and the women couldn't do it, there are bodybuilding women and there are very weak men. But on average, that is true, yes.
Okay.
Oh, I was on page 129. I'm sorry, Hannah. I keep forgetting to say. And let's all face it, ladies. If we're in a room of people and something happens, something bad happens, and somebody's going to have a total meltdown, it's probably going to be a woman.
Most likely, yes.
Okay? We respond to things differently. And Socrates was wise enough to realize, Plato was wise enough to realize that there are differences, unlike, I will throw this snide comment in, unlike some people today who can't seem to realize there are differences. But they have a nature that suits them for any mental pursuit that men might pursue, according to Plato. Yeah, Matthew.
I was just gonna say, I could explain that just men are more extreme than women. So while men can like usually do like bigger things, or like I've heard explain like make really like smart decisions and actually have those smart decisions be really effective.
Mm-hmm.
It also can make dumb decisions, like extreme in the opposite direction. Like it can make way more dumb, extreme, overarching decisions.
Hold on to that thought, because in a little while we're going to talk about the better something is, the worse it can go bad. Hold on to that. We'll come back to that. So that really doesn't answer the question, though. They want to know why they're going to share all the women, why they're not going to have personal wives. And why does Socrates think this will make the city stronger? I know, I like the looks. That's gross.
Not.
I like to think that this is completely just Plato's idea. It's not Socrates at all.
Very likely, but what do you think, Matthew?
It will help fidelity to the state, strengthen the bonds between men and women, and will eugenically strengthen the stock of Athens.
Okay, so first of all, let's get the ugly part out of the way. They're gonna breed them, basically.
Oh, so they're animals.
Okay,
now.
like a lottery. Okay, so the government's gonna set up a lottery system, and when it's your turn to get married, which really means for one night, you know, only the strong and good sort will win the lottery, and everyone will just accidentally lose the lottery and not get a chance to have children. Like, I want a picture of that. That's the reaction. And so that they will just get better and better. Okay, so that's one reason. But his other reason also, he says, that I'm on page 136, kind of towards the bottom, right below the C. Isn't it what happened? Okay, just above that. Doesn't privatization of pleasures and pains dissolve the city? All right, when everybody's very individualistic. This is mine. This is what I'm doing. These are my rights. Then it pulls people apart. And he says, isn't that what happens whenever such words as mine and not mine are used in unison? And similarly with someone else's. That it pulls us apart. This is my book. That's your book. And it separates us. So he thinks, hey, let's apply this to wives and husbands. They're all mine. So all the children born about the same time as any child I might have had would be my child. And anybody who is of an age that could be my parent is my parent. The only problem with this, I was thinking about this yesterday, all the people born at the same time as you would be potentially my brother or my sister. So
That's
who's
kind of an issue. That is kind of an issue in a few years.
That's a problem. But again, I really firmly believe that that Plato's playing a game here.
Yeah,
And
that's
he's
how I
not,
look at it.
that he's just speculating, like what could be, and that's part of what they asked him. They said, is this even possible? And so they're discussing whether or not it would be possible, would it be a positive thing? I don't believe that he is setting up the perfect state, that he believes this is the perfect state, because this book is to find justice in our soul, right? That's the point of their conversation. And I think this is a little bit of a lark, and I think some people take it more seriously than, that's my opinion, all right, then it's warranted. But skip to the next question. How does Socrates feel about the way Greeks were currently treating each other? I'm on page 145, Hannah. Okay, Matthew, I'm gonna let you. You got all the answers.
He said they should be brothers and find a common enemy in the barbarian. That makes sense.
Okay. Yes, so I'm on page 145. Okay, 144. Right above the C. First, enslavement. Do you think it is just for Greeks to enslave Greek cities? Or as far as they can, should they not even allow other cities to do so and make a habit of sparing the Greek race as a precaution against being enslaved by the barbarians? Okay, remember, Milos. The Athenians showed up at that island and they said, we're taking you out. We don't negotiate. And they said, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Athens said that. Remember, they sent a ship after a quick vote to Miletus to kill all the men and enslave the women and children. And it is only the grace of God that the second boat got there first. With the order, oh, we changed our minds. Let's not do that. And Plato, he's writing long after the war is over. But this is set during the war. And he's saying, that's not right. And then listen to what he says on page 145. I love this. Their attitude of mind should be that of people who will one day be reconciled and who won't always be at war.
I wonder what he was thinking when he said that.
Was that the way the Peloponnesian War was carried out? No, it was, they talk about total war, like we don't care if we take out civilians and everything. I mean, there were really no civilians in Greece, civilians were in the army. But anytime you just go and show up on an island and say, we're killing all the men and we're enslaving all the women and children, yeah, we're all Greek. You're not setting the stage for being friends anytime soon, are you? They're not going to forget that. This is totally opposite to the way that the Peloponnesian War was handled. But Plato, we would be friends one day. Unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, they never were. Thebes, I think I told you in the What Happened Next, in the early 300s, Thebes took over for a while. Then Philip of Macedon and Alexander came down, and it was the end of Greece as they knew it. But he says this on page 146. This is the way our citizens must treat their enemies, and they must treat barbarians the way Greeks currently treat each other. When will cities be free of evils? Because this city, whether you like the whole woman thing or not, is a well-run, well-oiled machine in which everybody's doing his or her part. But he says we look around and we really don't see any cities like that. Athens is not treating Greeks the way they should treat the barbarians. I'm not making a comment about the barbarians, but from their perspective. When is this ever going to happen? What is the condition for this ever coming to happen in reality? Ethan?
I'll just read it.
Read it.
Until political power and philosophy entirely coincide, while the many natures who are at present pursue either one exclusively or forcibly prevented from doing so, cities will have no rest from evils, like nor I think will the kingdoms.
And I'm going to read the beginning, what you read, just the beautiful. Until philosophers rule as kings, or those who are now called kings and leading men genuinely and adequately philosophize. Until our kings are philosophers. What does philosophy mean?
Love of knowledge.
A love of wisdom, exactly. Until our kings love wisdom, or our lovers of wisdom are willing to serve as kings, it will never happen. We will not have harmony in the state. We will not have harmony in the soul. Guess what? It happened, didn't it? A lover of wisdom, in fact, the person who is wisdom, is the king. It actually happened. Jesus came, and the philosopher is the king, and the king is the philosopher. And we will have peace, just not yet. Not till everybody's under the same king, right? This is what, Socrates, Plato, bless your heart. You wanted something, you saw something. And this is why people like Socrates, have any of you ever read the Divine Comedy before? In the first part of the Divine Comedy, they go to hell, Inferno, and there's a sort of a doorstep to hell, and it's the virtuous pagans. It's the ones who never had a chance. There was no ability for them to know about Jesus, but yet, even through natural reason, they strove for it, and people like Socrates end up there in the Divine Comedy. I'm not making a comment theologically about whether that's so or not. I'm just making it that people have observed that some of these pagans are more virtuous than some people who have called themselves Christians sometimes. But he knew we need wisdom to rule us. Solomon knew, right? This, you've given me a great people. I can't rule them, so give me wisdom. Socrates knew. So they ask Socrates, this is at the bottom of this page and takes us into book 6. What is a philosopher? And he says on page 150, between the sea and the deep, the one who readily and willingly tries all kinds of learning, who turns gladly to learning and is insatiable for it, is rightly called a philosopher, isn't he? All right? Somebody who just loves learning, they love the truth. They have an insatiable desire for the truth. And they said, yeah, Socrates, that's all fine and good, but, you know, some people, let's take beauty, for example, Socrates. You know, some people don't really believe that there is such a thing as the beautiful, the beauty. Whenever I do this, I'm looking at the forms, okay? I'm not having an experience, and I'm not looking at the ceiling. These are Plato's forms. That, remember, there's a chair, and there's a chair, and there's a chair, but there is chairness that exists somewhere else in another reality, and all chairs partake of chairness, and it makes them chairs. So we all partake of the essence of what it is to be human. I suppose for Christians we would say that would be the image of God. But we do partake of something that makes us all human. So Socrates, there are some people who don't really believe that the beautiful is out there somewhere, but they like beautiful things. Should we call them philosophers? And he said, well, that's a tough question, isn't it? Because when you know something, he says, what is knowledge? And he said, well, knowledge is knowledge of a thing that is. You can't really know something if it doesn't exist. I mean, I guess you can say I know about unicorns, but I don't really. I have an image of unicorns in my head, and I have an opinion about them, right? So you have knowledge, and then ignorance is just you don't know anything, right? Ignorance is just ignorance. But the knowledge now of stuff that might be imaginary or might be just an individual thing. My Praxiteles statue, okay? It's beautiful, and I go to Cnidos, and I go to the round temple, and I look at it, it's so beautiful. And Socrates says, well, but is there any way in which any given beautiful thing could also not be beautiful? Like a part of it, maybe. Or, you know, we might say, this is an experience, not a thing. But, you know, dinner is fabulous, but we don't like hunger. Hunger is an unpleasant part, but the hunger is what makes the dinner so good. Do you see what I mean? So it's got a downside. He said, you know, beautiful things usually in this world have a downside. Some part of it is less than perfect, is less than the beautiful. So those things that they call beautiful, they're beautiful in a way and they're not beautiful in a way. So they neither are nor are not. They're on both sides of the fence. And he said, what do we call it when you think about something that is in a way and isn't in a way? Like hot, cold, high, low, big, small. Opinion. Those people have an opinion about beauty, but they don't understand the beautiful. So they're sort of like philosophers up here, and they're climbing, they're getting there, but so many of them just get there and they stop. Socrates wants them to get back up on the ladder and go all the way. Does that make sense at all? Okay. Yeah, Alex.
I was just about to say that an example of a beautiful thing having a downside is I saw the Battle of Gettysburg painting, digitally of course, but and I thought, whoa, this is a really cool painting. But then I really looked at it, and there were people dying in the thing, and cannons going off, and then there was the charge of the cavalry, and you saw people being shot down.
The ultimate example, I suppose, would be any representation of the crucifixion that is beautiful and ugly at the same time. At the same time. And if I were going to be Socrates, I would say, but when I look at that, I am not seeing the ugling part of that event. I am now taking it. Okay, do I want to do this? Okay, so we're gonna do book 6. We're gonna do it in wrong order, okay? Just because we're here. I'm gonna start at the bottom. I'm gonna start at the end of book 6 and work my way backwards. The line. The line. Do you know what I mean on page 183? Okay, go to 183. Socrates says, what we need to do, and I may be, when we go back through the rest of the book, I may be repeating myself a little bit, but since we're here, let's talk about this. We have 4 levels, according to Socrates, according to Plato, on which we can think. All right, and the lowest level, the lowest 2 levels come through my senses. I see it, I hear it, I smell it. And the upper 2 levels are only in my mind. They don't really exist in a visible reality that I can see them. And the lowest level is what on his line he calls imagination. And remember what imagination has in the word image. A nation of images. You see an image of something. So for example, if I look in the water and I see a reflection of myself, or I see a reflection of the trees on the other side of me, I'm not really seeing my actual self or the actual trees, but I'm seeing something that leads me to understanding of them, right? I have an image. And I can conjure that up anytime it's come through my senses previously, right? Like hot dog. Does everyone have an image of the hot dog in your head right now? Please tell me you've all eaten a hot dog. Why am I recommending that? Hot dogs are wickedly bad for you. You should not be eating hot dogs, neither should I. But y'all conjure up. It's not here physically, but you've seen them, and so we've got an image. But then we move up, and so I'm looking in the pond, and then I look, and there's the trees, all right? Now I'm seeing the real deal. And that is what he calls belief. All right, I have a level, and belief is an odd thing for us to call it, but it's very sure and strong. I'm not Descartes from you guys last year, all right? I'm not going to think that everything doesn't exist except me and my thinking brain, all right? It really is here. It's chair. It's here. I'm not imagining it, okay? I have a certain knowledge of it. But then I can start thinking about all the other chairs I've ever seen, about my lazy boy recliner, and about, but what about love seats? How are they related to chairs and stools? Are stools really chairs, or are they something else altogether? But I'm doing all this in my head, right? It doesn't exist. I mean, these things exist in reality, but all this is going on in my head, right? I'm putting it together. I'm logically lumping it together and thinking it over and separating things. That's his thought. He uses an example, geometry. And if you think about it, we all know how bad I am at drawing things. We have verified this many times. So, we have this, and if I do this, you all know something about this triangle now. That's not actually true. I mean, if I got a square out, this is not a square corner, this is so not a square corner. I didn't really try, but even if I tried, it wouldn't be very good. And so now this is representing something that only exists in your mind. You see? It's not really, this is representative of every triangle that has a square corner, every right triangle. And now geometry, that's why he's having his guardians do all sorts of math and geometry and astronomy and stuff, because it makes you stop looking at things and it makes you live inside your head. This starts a process in your brain that really, this just symbolizes, and it has nothing really to do with the process that's going on in your brain right now. Because you are all envisioning. I didn't tell you 3 of what or 2 of what. It doesn't matter. You can conjure up a mental image of the 3 and the 2, and you can put them together. You do it so well, you don't know you're doing it. We do it all the time. We live in thought all the time. But some things make us go there better than other things. Does that make sense? Tell me if I just stop making sense.
makes sense.
I don't know what to do about it, but you need to tell me if I stop making sense. But he said, most people stop there. Like they're feeling really good about their thought abilities, and I'm thought of every kind of chair. But he said they need to go one step higher and look at the form, okay? Socrates, Plato. I've not read all the complete works of Plato, okay? I have read maybe half of them, all right? A third to a half, okay? But none of what I have read yet does Socrates or Plato give me step-by-step instructions about how to see the form. So good luck with that. But that some way I should be able to experience the form of triangle, the form of right triangle. And that when I'm forced to look at it in my head, and I'm forced to do geometric proofs, all right, which love them or hate them, it's a very systematic exercise that makes you pull information out of your brain that the picture on the page is just a representation of. This exists off the page. That's what he wants these lovers of beauty to do. That's what he wants these lovers of justice to do. To see what it is that makes all things just, or all beautiful things beautiful. And I feel like this is another example of Socrates and Christianity, because I would not be the first one. The church fathers often did this, that where is the form? It's in the mind of God, the creator, the source of everything. In him we live and move and have our being. Paul tells the Athenians, as some of your own poets have said. He keeps it all going. I only exist breathing in this room at this moment because God is making it happen. He could withdraw it from me, and I could just cease to exist. In him I live and move and have my being. And so Plato, Socrates, they're looking for something, and I think what they're looking for is God. And Ethan, you notice that often Plato says God. He doesn't say the gods, or the God.
I put that in my essay. I had to make that very sure because it's, I mean, you can argue however you want that Socrates was wrongfully murdered or not for being for his impiety against the gods, but there's a lot of proof, a lot of evidence that he didn't really believe in the Greek gods.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And God, or one higher power, he's not thinking, oh, these gods that are immoral and all this. He's thinking a higher power that is letting these forms happen, or a higher power that is over like justice, love, all of this, and is all those things and more. It's a brain strain.
I agree, absolutely. Did one of you gentlemen have something you want to say? Great. We'll move on. Let's go backwards now. So Socrates just dropped a bomb at the end of the previous book and said, until kings are philosophers or philosophers are kings, we will have no peace. And they said, Socrates, I'm afraid we have some bad news for you. And this was the first question. What kind of people do most consider philosophers to be, according to Adeimantus? Most people have an opinion of philosophers, and it's not a positive one. Matthew, what do they think?
Either cranks or completely useless.
Cranks or completely useless. Vicious or useless. So, he gives an analogy of the ship owner. Do you guys remember this? It's on page 162. And he says, imagine, towards the top, third line down of 162. Imagine then that something like the following happens on a ship or on many ships. The ship owner is bigger and stronger than everyone else on board, but he's hard of hearing, a bit short-sighted, and his knowledge of seafaring is equally deficient. The sailors are quarreling with one another about steering the ship, each of them thinking that he should be the captain. even though he's never learned the art of navigation, cannot point to anyone who taught it to him, or to a time when he learned it. Indeed, they claim that it isn't teachable, and are ready to cut to pieces anyone who says that it is. They're always crowding around the ship owner, begging him, and doing everything possible to get him to turn the rudder over to them. And sometimes, if they don't succeed in persuading him, they execute the ones who do succeed and throw them overboard. And then, having stupefied their noble ship owner with drugs, wine, or in some other way, they rule the ship, using up what's in it and sailing in the way that people like that are prone to do. Moreover, they call the person who is clever at persuading or forcing the ship owner to let them rule a navigator, a captain, or one who knows ships, and dismiss anyone else as useless. They don't understand that a true captain must pay attention to the seasons of the year, the sky, the stars, the winds, and all that pertains to his craft, if he's really to be the ruler of a ship. And they don't believe there is any craft that would enable him to determine how he should steer the ship, whether the others want him to or not, or any possibility of mastering this alleged craft, or of practicing it at the same time as the craft of navigation. Don't you think that the true captain will be called a real stargazer, a babbler, and a good-for-nothing by those who sail in ships governed that way, in which such things happen? When someone sees the truth and you're surrounded by a bunch of idiots, the person who sees the truth seems like they're a nutcase. When they say, no, we need to pay attention. You see, I have this device, and we can look at the stars, and we can find, oh, shut up. You don't know. It's just this wheel. You just turn this wheel. That's all there is to it. Anybody can do it. Socrates feels like that's how states are being run currently. People claw their way to the top because they want power, and they know nothing. And the people who really come and they say, this is what we need to consider. Oh, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Exactly.
Roasted.
Exactly. So that explains the useless. It doesn't explain the cranks or the vicious, all right? But that's why some people think philosophers are useless, because they're talking about something that the other people just don't even understand. And so this is the next question I asked you. Why do those with philosophic tendencies go bad more than those without them? What is your opinion, Matthew?
The bad is more opposed to the good than the not good. The larger the person's spirit / mind, the more extreme they could go for either good or bad.
Okay.
Oh no, and then I put something here. I've heard this before, I'm not sure where it's from, but I've heard the greatest saints could have been the greatest sinners.
Probably C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis talked about this exceedingly. Have any of you ever read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis? Okay. Do you remember there's a woman who loves her son. She just loves her son
yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
When love goes bad, it goes very bad. Because love is a really, really good thing. When lust goes bad, it's just paltry, sort of. But when real feelings of love go bad, they're catastrophic. Yeah, what were you going to say, Ethan?
Oh, no. Okay, good. I got it.
Good.
So I would say also philosophers are more danger going bad than good, because their ideas can lead to certain inconscriptancies, like little like rough like edges where it's like, what is love, or what is mankind, things like that, and it can turn into something like absolutely immoral.
Mm-hmm.
Like people at that day, the Greeks, they were awesome thinkers, but how'd they treat their women? Not very nice.
And how did they treat the fellow Greeks during the Peloponnesian War? Right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Oh.
So people like to say that I don't know why this came into my head. I used this yesterday's class. Like Hitler's a nutcase. Maybe, but Hitler was not an unintelligent man either. He had an idea, and it just, I guess this part ran away with him. Do you know what I mean? He had an idea about race and about purity and about how to make the world a better place. And he's intelligent enough to be more intelligent than the people around him and persuade them. You see, when a mind like that goes bad, it's awful. But when a very mediocre mind goes bad, it only produces mediocre results. Do you see what I mean? Like if I lose it, I'm not going to take over half the world, and I'm not smart enough to persuade people to let me do it. But he was. Yeah, Naya, did you want to say something? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of a jumble of thoughts, but like obviously kind of what you said, where like an intelligent mind when it goes bad, and there are very intelligent people that don't necessarily have the power or the natural way to persuade people to do things like that. But then also, like, kind of what you're saying, like when philosophers with their, like, intelligence gets confused by common people, or just in general, it can, like, be very disastrous. Because somebody might take what they said in the wrong light.
Yes, exactly, which happens all the time. Also, oh yeah, go ahead, Carson.
What's even worse is people who are not intelligent that have the power to persuade people.
Oh, no, that is also horrible. And that's the sophists. You know what I mean? Who specialize in persuading people, whether they got anything happening up here or not. Listen at the bottom of page 165. It talks about people, so you've got philosophic tendencies, we'll say. And it says, when many of them are sitting together in assemblies, courts, theaters, army camps, or in some other public gathering of the crowd, they object very loudly and excessively to some of the things that are said or done, and approve others in the same way, shouting and clapping, so that the very rocks and surroundings echo the din of their praise or blame, and double it. In circumstances like that, what is the effect, as they say, on a young person's heart? What private training can hold out and not be swept away by that kind of praise or blame, and be carried by the flood wherever it goes? So that he'll say the same things are beautiful or ugly as the crowd does, follow the same way of life as they do, and be the same sort of person as they are. What do we call that today? That's peer pressure. You know, I know what's good and true, but I'm surrounded by all these voices, and they just crowd out whatever little knowledge I have of it.
It's also people pleasing as well.
And it is people pleasing.
Yeah, it's a bit of both.
Come to 168, page 168 with me. I want to read this. Let me see where I want to start. Okay. Let's start as he gets older. Let's talk about a hypothetical, philosophic sort of person. As he gets older, his family and fellow citizens will want to make use of him in connection with their own affairs. Of course. Therefore, they'll pay court to him with their requests and honors, trying by their flattery to secure for themselves ahead of time the power that is going to be his. What do you think someone like that will do in such circumstances, especially if he happens to be from a great city in which he's rich, well-born, good-looking, and tall? Won't he be filled with impractical expectations and think himself capable of managing the affairs, not only of the Greeks, but of the barbarians as well? And as a result, won't he exalt himself to great heights and be brimming with pretension and pride that is empty and lacks understanding? And if someone approaches a young man in that condition and gently tells him the truth, namely that there's no understanding in him, that he needs it, and that it can't be acquired unless he works like a slave to attain it, do you think it will be easy for him to listen when he's in the midst of so many evils? And even if a young man of that sort somehow sees the point, and is guided and drawn to philosophy because of his noble nature and his kinship with reason, what do you think those people will do if they believe that they're losing their use of him and his companionship? Is there anything they won't do or say to prevent him from being persuaded, or anything they won't do or say about his persuader, whether plotting against him in private or publicly bringing him into court? Who's the young man? It's in the footnote if you want to cheat.
Alcibiades.
Alcibiades. Isn't this Alcibiades? Socrates tried. Alcibiades, And Alcibiades himself said, oh, I listen to Socrates and he just enchants me. But then the crowd, then I get, adored and praised, and I go for it. And is there anything they won't do to his persuader, including haul him into court, which they did, and executed him. Not just because of Alcibiades, but it's a portrait of Alcibiades. And Socrates saw something in that young man. But when he went bad, he went pretty bad. And when he caused trouble, he caused a good deal of trouble. Not just a little bit of trouble. Dragged him to Sicily, went over to Sparta, went over to Persia. He went back. All right. How is the good? So we're talking about the beautiful earlier. Now they're talking about the good, which is the main goal, isn't it? What is the good? This is what Socrates wanted to find out. Because we need to know if we want to live a good life. Is it money? Well, but money is only good for what you can buy for it. So it can't be the good. Is it health? Well, we usually just want to be healthy because A, it's pleasant to be healthy, and B, because we want to use our bodies to do things, right? And we can't when we're sick. So it's not an end. It's a means to an end. What is the good? Well, they're not going to answer that question. I'm not sure if Plato ever answered that question.
These kinds of discussions really aren't meant to give you the answer just to make you think.
They are exactly just meant to make you think. But how is the good like the sun? Whatever the good is, how is it like the sun? All right, Matthew, it's all yours.
The sun illuminates things to the human. Oh, you're gonna say something?
No, I had just seen it earlier. Now I can't find
that's
it.
fine.
The sun illuminates things to the human eye. Like goodness helps people figure out what things are. Helps them see like the good in things.
Okay.
The overall.
Exactly. He says, you know what? So I have eyes, and they work. Yay. There's an object over there. There's a trash can. Yay. I can see it. But something else is required before I can see it. Light. I can't see it if I don't have light. So the sun being representative of any sort of light. We have artificial light now. The good is like that. He said people are walking around in this world thinking they understand things. But until they've seen the good, until they have the good in them, they can't really understand. Just like I can't see that trash can over there if you turn off all the lights. That's why he wants to find it. Because it makes all life make sense. And without it, life just doesn't make sense. And of course, now I'm thinking of Jesus saying, why do you call me good? There's only one good. The Father is good. He is the good. So we already talked about the line. So that's the point at which Socrates starts talking about, well, how do I learn to see that good? How do I work myself up from these levels? It's not really a how-to manual, like I said. But what are the things that I can use, like geometry, to train myself to look beyond what my senses see, to see the good that really is, and then I can look around and see everything in a different way. So, at the beginning of Book 7, this is probably the most famous thing Plato ever wrote. It is the cave analogy. Imagine, he says, that you live in a cave. You were born there. You've never been out. And you're chained, and you can only face one direction. Your head doesn't turn. You can't move. And there's a light source behind you. There's a fire. And people behind you have stick figures, and they walk back and forth in front of the fire, and you see the shadows passing in front of you. And that's all you've ever seen, And the people back behind you, they talk occasionally, but the cave echoes, and so it sounds like the shadows are talking. And that's all you know. And imagine someone got free. They got free, and they turned around. And they said, there's fire, there's light, and there's guys, and there's stuff on sticks. He said, those shadows aren't the real thing. Those things on sticks are the real thing. I'm like, get out of here. Okay, they're the babbling philosopher, right? They're the guy who's no good. You're a nut job. This is all there's ever been. This is, you can hear them talking, for crying out loud. Like, no, really, they're with the sticks. No. So, you know, this poor guy at this point, oh, that's what a tree is. That's what a person is. I'm ignoring the people holding the sticks. Okay. Know how that works into the analogy. Oh, now I know what a tree really is. Now I know what a person really is. But wait, what if they get out of the cave? Remember, they're still in the cave. What if they stumble out into the sunshine? First of all, you can't see at first. You know, this has happened to all of you. You know, you come out of a dark movie theater or whatever, and the sun's just blazing. I can't see anything. Where are my sunglasses? First of all, you will be blinded. I mean, not permanently, you know, but I mean, you won't be able to see. And then when you kind of can, oh my gosh, those are trees. The shadows weren't trees, and the cardboard things weren't trees. Those are trees. That's Socrates' goal, except it's even one more than that. It would be, what is the thing that makes all trees trees, right? But he said, now imagine this guy goes back down to the cave and he tries to set the other prisoners free and tell them what he saw. They're not going to come. Most of them are not going to come. This reminds me, and this is a stretch, I guess, this reminds me a little bit of evangelism. When you know, it says in about taste and see that the Lord is good. You know, and that you can't convince people. C.S. Lewis said, it's like, you know, we play around with our little pleasures, and we have no concept of the glory waiting for us. And he said, it's like a child playing in a mud puddle who has no concept of a weekend at the seaside. You can't get him to leave their mud puddle. I love my mud puddle. Like, no, it's the ocean, it's a beach, there's sand, there's sun. There's shells. Can't you understand? No, I like my mud puddle. And we're the children. And the people would stay in the cave. Don't you think? A lot of them would. And they might persecute the person who goes back down and explains it to them. So our job is somehow we've got to show people that there's a world outside of the cave. And for Socrates, now here's where we separate. I've mentioned this before. Plato saw the material world as a burden, as a drain on us. It's a good thing to get rid of your body in this world. Not a good thing to kill yourself, but it's good. It's a good thing to not be in this anymore. Christians say, no, God made it. In fact, it was never meant to be taken into two pieces to begin with, right? You know, we weren't ever meant to have spirits away from bodies. That's just weird. Death is weird. It's not supposed to be. But he's looking at it from the perspective that all of this is tainted. You know what I mean? You know, because like you want to live a life of thinking, but then you get hungry and you got to pay your taxes and there's all this stuff you got to do and you got to run errands and it burdens you. We would call that life. He would call that a burden. But both of us agree that we are, many people are living not in complete reality if they don't know God. There's part of reality that they're missing. They're missing out on. And we would like to show them the reality. But they have to want to see it, you know. But for Socrates, that is through education. I told you we were going to come back to education again, right? Later. And I asked you, what is the goal of the education through which Socrates wants to lead the guardians? Remember, they're going to have the geometry and then astronomy and music training. What's the point? What do you say, Matthew?
The redirection of the soul from the darkness to the light.
Okay. Everybody turn to page 190 if you've got your book with you. Remembering always the cave story, you know, as we read this. So I'm halfway down. I'm right above the letter C, okay? If that's true, then here's what we must think about these matters. Education isn't what some people declare it to be, namely putting knowledge into souls that lack it, like putting sight into blind eyes. And they answered, they do say that. But our present discussion, on the other hand, shows that the power to learn is present in everyone's soul, and that the instrument with which each learns is like an eye that cannot be turned around from darkness to light without turning the whole body. This instrument cannot be turned around from that which is coming into being without turning the whole soul until it is able to study that which is, and the brightest thing that is, namely the one we call the good. Isn't that right? Now listen to this. Then education is the craft concerned with doing this very thing, this turning around, and with how the soul can most easily and effectively be made to do it. It isn't the craft of putting sight into the soul. Education takes for granted that sight is there, but it isn't turned the right way or looking where it ought to look, and it tries to redirect it appropriately. Have you ever thought of education that way? We come here and we're messed up, right? We live in a fallen world and we're sinful creatures. And we're messed up. And we think that bad things are good and good things are bad. I'm thinking, because we just read Macbeth, I just did Macbeth with the little kids. Foul is fair and fair is foul, right? And somebody needs to show us the right way to look. They don't need to fill our brains with facts. This is why I'm not asking you to memorize a bunch of dates. I think there's a lot of value in memorizing dates. And you have to memorize your times tables. I'm sorry, just assuming you already have. But it's all about learning to look in the right direction, to love the right things. I love the wrong things. But God is teaching me to love the right things. And if someone says something is beautiful, like the consensus is, say Plato's Republic, for example, that 2,500 years of people have said, this is a brilliant book. And I read it and I'm like, yeah, not so much. I need to stop and say, maybe there's something wrong with me. That's uncomfortable. Maybe I'm not seeing it. Do you see what I mean? We just don't think about it that way, do we? And education for you guys, your students, I feel like I'm being self-educated because I'm always learning something. But I try to remind myself, it's okay if I don't remember every detail of what I read. Am I learning to look in the right direction and love the right things? Then I'm becoming more and more educated every day. And you know what? You can be a book-smart person and be thoroughly wicked and evil, as the aforementioned Hitler, or that ilk. Anyway, I think it's a beautiful way. I know, you gotta go, you'll leave me and you got math and science to do and everything, but maybe it just will make it a little bit different for you if you think, I am concentrating on using, the forms out there of the 3 and the 2 and the square root of 16 or whatever, and I'm imagining cubing it, or, like that's something you do in your mind. And then when you think about your education, is just learning to love the right things. Anyway, okay, that was my preaching for today. And why does he disparage compulsory learning? What do you say, Matthew?
A free man should not be forced to learn things that he'll end up forgetting anyway.
Free man should not be forced to learn. That takes us back to why isn't knowledge free, I feel like. Okay, I've got a few minutes, and I need to talk about the next thing you're going to write for me. And it is going to be the last big thing you're going to write. You're going to do two things this week for me, okay? One, yes,
How many?
two.
What are we gonna do?
Don't you want to love the right things?
What are we doing?
I will force you to do this. It will be compulsory. No, we're going to write two different. We're going to start a longer paper and write a short paper.
Oh, nice.
Oh, see, that's the right response. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is one of our short answer summas, 250 to 300 words. Everybody got that? I want this next week. And the topic is, I'm not going to write it down. Would you enjoy a conversation with Socrates?
Oh, that's awesome.
Would it be valuable to you? Are you the sort who would be persuadable? And that takes a little, you don't have to confess that to me or not, but if you do, I will not tell other people what you said in your paper. All right? But I also want you to start a longer paper. This is our last big essay. And this week, okay, am I going too fast? Do I need to wait for you to write that down?
No.
Okay. This week you're only doing invention. All right? So brainstorming, ideas. But our ultimate thing that we're brainstorming about is this. It's easier to say it than to write it. You're arguing one of these sides. Christians, I will write it. Christians agree or disagree with Socrates. Okay, now I can't remember the rest. Socrates' views on justice, the good, and the purpose of life. This is huge.
That's hard.
This is hard. This is our mind-blowing final essay. Now, you're not done reading the Republic yet, right? So you're going to be reading more about these things. So here's what I would do if I were you and I was given this assignment. I would write down a Christian's column, a Christianity column, and a Socrates column. And I would write down things that are distinctively one or the other, like God became a man. Right. I realize that doesn't address one of those specifically, but I'm just writing down things that Christianly specifically, or material things are evil. All right. And then if I found anything on which we agree, like that there is a good that's higher than us, I would write it in the middle and maybe put, we both believe that. And I would generate ideas. I wouldn't even limit myself to justice, the good, and the purpose of life, because I think when we look at the list that we conjure up, things are going to start jumping out at us. So don't limit yourself. Anything you think of that is distinctively, you don't have to do a whole catechism of Christian theology, don't do that. But you know what I mean, things that we can compare. God's the creator, so things are good, versus material things are bad. Yeah, Ethan, what
Do you
did
want
you
it
say?
to be like a 5-paragraph essay like this?
It is going to be.
Instead of a 6-paragraph essay?
Yeah, I think we'll just do the 5. I think we'll leave out the refutation, because I don't know. You know what, can I think over that? Whether I want to do a refutation or not. Because all I'm really asking you to do is just write down ways that Christianity and Plato or Socrates come together, and ways they diverge. And bring your list with you next week, and we'll talk about it some more, okay? And then we'll do an outline, okay? So the only thing you actually physically have to write is just an opinion, short paragraph, would you enjoy a chat with Socrates? Yes or no, and why not?
When
Yes.
would it be due?
This paper? I don't know. I actually,
2 weeks from now?
see, you guys are tough because we have one less week with you. I was going to give you like 3 weeks to do it, like an invention, arrangement, and elocution week. But I want to make sure that I get it. See, I want to get it and look at it and give it back to you before our last time, because you're a week. Because my other classes have an extra week.
You'd have to give it back to us on week 15, which is, I think, 4 weeks from now.
Yep.
Yeah, week 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a while.
We've got time.
Okay,
Yeah, we've
okay.
got time, because.
But I was toying, Naya. I was toying with making you do revisions on this one
Oh,
and then resubmit. Can I also take that? May I have a grace period week to decide if I'm going to make you write it the second week or just do arrangement? It seems like a little beneath you guys to just do arrangement one week, especially if we talk about it in class.
We're pretty serious.
Arrangement.
You've done a lot of that, so I feel like we could probably brainstorm this week.
Let's go.
Yeah, totally.
We'll go over the outline in class next week, and then I'll probably have you write it the second week. But this will be your last big one. But then it would give me a week to give it back to you, and if I say, this one, we're finally going to take the time for you to do some revisions and do a second, because I always want to do that, but the fact that I see you once a week makes me not. Because it would just take so long to, it's a week before you get it back, and it's a week before I get it back, and it's a week before you get it back again. And it's just... Anyway, okay, I'm sorry. Now I'm babbling. So finish the Republic next week. Tell me if you would enjoy a conversation with Socrates, and then find points of agreement and points of disagreement between Christianity and Socrates or Plato. And I'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Yeah.